way of taking the weapon and giving it back to them when they're done, if they're entitled to have it back. I think it's just a way of enforcing the current law. I thought that we would have better luck in the House this session, but it just wasn't meant to be. But maybe you all will address this with some more energy and with more earnest, that we would be able to have success here. I don't think it's asking too much to have a process so that we could enforce current state law, so that we would be safer. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I know that you all are aware of that, and this is a way to take stock of, one, the femicides that occur in the state, but also I think the relationship between that, the killing of an intimate partner, and mass shootings. I could talk to you about in Plano when that shooting occurred, that had domestic violence. Some domestic violence was part of that. In the Sutherland Springs, it was as well. In Santa Fe, it was as well. Right? As far as we know, it wasn't here, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't address this issue so that we could make ourselves safer. I think you probably have heard this as you cross the state. I think in order for us to address this in some intelligent way, although I don't think we could have predicted what happened to us on August 3rd in any way, but I'll tell you that through the healing process, I think collaboration is very important, both within the public, in the public and in the government sector. I think law enforcement, we can work better together. We need to know each other better, and we need to be able to use that in a really smart way. This is a unique community. I can't get rocked, can get shocked and saddened by one person's act. I can tell you, just because I know I'm probably on a video camera, so I'm going to just do one little commercial, if you would just allow me this. Our office, we do a lot of outreach on victim assistance, and we've done our best to help the families of the 22 and the 26 who were injured, and the others who are suffering from secondary trauma. But we have a history in my office of doing this. So for the last 12 years, we have walked across El Paso. Initially it was 26 miles, then it was 10. 26, I got older and wiser, that's too far to walk. This year it's only 5 miles because we're expecting a large crowd. But on November 3rd, Sunday, 8 o'clock, we're gonna walk from Escalante Park, and those in the community know where that is, to the Memorial Reading Garden, where we have a sculpture because of the city, where we honor the victims who have lost their lives due to crime. There are 1,600 names on that wall. Now there's 22 more. And so we're gonna walk from the park to there. And all I would ask the community to do is to register for the walk. That would be at epcounty.com/DA. It's pretty simple. It's a free walk. We give you a t-shirt. We welcome everyone. I think events like this, and we've had others around the city, so that we can come together as a community, are very helpful in allowing us to attempt to move forward. The sadness that we felt on August 3rd, I think, is still with us. I can tell you personally, the sadness of August 3rd is still with me. And you're talking to a very seasoned prosecutor. I've seen, well, you can imagine, in 27 years, and my time in Harris County, and you can imagine what I've seen, but I have never seen or never witnessed what happened to us on August 3rd at 10:38. You know, I haven't done it. I didn't do it this past Saturday, and then I feel guilty for not thinking about it. But for many Saturdays after that, I would stop and pause at 10:38, because I think it is a life-changing event. It was for me. It was for this community, and I'm so glad to see all of you here, because I think only through working together with you all and here within El Paso are we ever going to try to be able to protect ourselves in a better way. And
thank you for your testimony, both of you. And as Senator Rodriguez said earlier, Chair Huffman and Senator Whitmire were delayed in Houston because of airline problems. There was a problem with the crew, and there's a problem related to weather. But they should be here soon. We're sorry that they missed your testimony, and I'm sure they will be too. Senator Rodriguez, did you have questions?
Maybe a couple of questions. One to both of you. And Mayor, you pointed out that this was a crime driven by by hate and white supremacy. And the individual, we learned, purchased an AR-15 type rifle, assault type of weapon. His mother called the police concerned about that. So my question to both of you is, we're here to hear testimony on how we can prevent community mass violence, as happened here in El Paso, and want to hear any ideas, any proposals, any thoughts regarding sensible gun safety legislation, along with any ideas on how to curtail the hate crimes in our community and in this state. So I'm just wondering whether either one of you or both of you have got some thoughts on, or any recommendations, any ideas that you have along those lines.
Well, I thought about that when I was invited to testify, and I would love to be able to tell you that I had a solution. I don't have that solution. I think it's going to be baby steps in a direction to making us a better community. I suggested to you the gun surrender protocols. I think that I would hope that you all would look at that. I think that's an idea that, one, I think that is sellable within the state, and it's a way for us to address what happens, at least what we see in domestic violence cases where there's intimate partner violence, where there's femicide. I think there is a relationship between that and the mass shootings. I can tell you just from what's in the public atmosphere is that our shooter was a loner. I think the issue of whether or not he has mental health issues is questionable. I don't think the automatic response that a mental health issue is that we're going to solve our problem that way. I think it's more complicated than that. And I honestly, as long as my time as district attorney, I wish I could tell you a better solution than the one I gave you, but I think it's baby steps in that direction.
Thank you. Mayor, did you have something to add?
I feel like our district attorney as well. I mean, what we've been focused on is the aftermath. I mean, we are one of the safest cities in the nation, according to the Uniform Crime Statistics, as reported to the FBI. We have been number 1, number 2, or number 3 for many years. I mean, we only had 18 murders in a population in our county of 850,000 in 2018. So you see what we're dealing with. One thing I wanted to add that I didn't add at the beginning is the mental health side, to re-echo what the senator and what our district attorney said. Our city is putting together, our Office of Emergency Management, a long-term facility for mental health for anyone who's touched or wants to do it. We're working on that. We've got a victims fund, which right now I think is exceeding about $6 million, but I don't think that's going to be near enough when we're dealing with some of the things we're dealing with. But I want to, as I studied things and talked to our chief of police and other things, I don't have a single problem with any kind of verification on private sales, background checks of any type. I don't care if it's 3 days or 3 months, there ought to be a background check. The red flag laws related to mental health, that can be a slippery slope. I don't have a problem with that. You all are going to have to resolve that. You've got 2 issues that I look at it from that standpoint. One is good Samaritan protections. Somebody reports somebody who has they believe to have some mental health issues and have a weapon, and it turns out that there was nothing there, but they were doing it because of concern, not because of any malice or anything like that. Then you're going to have to come up with some form of good Samaritan protection for somebody who's just simply being a good citizen in their own eyes. and the other part is on the weaponization side, where somebody reports somebody just to get them. So I don't know how you balance all that. That's going to have to be some issues, but I do think the mental health side is significant. We don't know where we are with this particular shooter. I read his diatribe. It's nothing but hate-filled rhetoric and evil. That's all I can say.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I can follow up, Mayor, the bill that I filed, the red flag bill, extreme risk protective order bill that I filed, included a provision to penalize people who make false reports to address that concern that you raised, making it a Class B misdemeanor to falsely file a complaint, because some people might want to do it out of malice or whatever.
Right.
And we wanted to make sure that that protection was in there. I think your idea, though, about a Good Samaritan also is something we ought to consider for whatever legislation we might come up with. Plenty of due process, plenty of protections for the individual that is being complained of, including the highest civil standard that you can impose under the law, clear and convincing evidence, rather than the typical preponderance of the evidence. Clear and convincing evidence, as a DA will tell you, is just below the beyond a reasonable doubt in the criminal law. And so the idea of including that was so that it's not easy to get one of these. You got to really present your evidence, your information, in order to have a judge order a protective order with a denial of access to guns. And I think that's, I guess for the listening public here, that's what the district attorney is talking about in terms of that House bill dealing with how do you relinquish your weapons once there's been an order entered by a court. And courts can do that in the domestic violence arena. They can also do it in involuntary commitments in the mental health side. But the system right now does not have any mandatory requirements or any way in which you can ensure that that individual relinquishes their weapon. So I've done some research. There's a lot of states that have passed laws, Mr. Esparza, that indeed provide for a way of having that gun relinquished. And if the person doesn't turn it in within X number of hours or days, then law enforcement is authorized to go and retrieve the weapon. There are some people who are concerned, as we heard in Odessa last week, that that might be a violation of the Second Amendment. But as I pointed out, there's a number of states that have these laws in the books. None of those laws have been stricken down as unconstitutional.
Now, I don't think it's a violation of the Second Amendment. I have a list I could easily provide you of across the state where they have gun surrender protocol.
Right.
Have what?
A list where other states have gun surrender protocols, where, all we're asking is to enforce the current state law. We just don't have that process. You would think we would, but we don't. And we need that. We need a process so that we could, when necessary, a person could surrender their weapon. I would tell you that the Attorney General's Victim Compensation Program has been excellent. They have been really good partners. So the shooting was on Saturday. My office, my victim assistance office, we worked all day Saturday, all day Sunday, like many others in the community. And they were here on Monday morning. They flew in, that victim compensation application, they helped people fill it out. We help people fill it out. Other agencies across the community have done that, and that has really been helpful. There is one little quirk that something that you should think about, but the Victims Compensation Program is not available to the foreign nationals, the 8 that lost their lives. They weren't residents in the state, and thus they weren't able to get the benefit of the Victims Compensation Program. We are, hopefully, through the one fund, are going to be able to attempt to at least monetarily in some way compensate them for their loss, for the economic losses, those families, but those 8 were not eligible for victims compensation. I can tell you, though, that the AG was a good partner in helping us fill out those applications and allowing those victims and the families of the surviving families to be able to get some assistance as we move forward.
Thank you. Senator Rodriguez, is that it?
No, that's.
Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And first of all, I want to say to everybody out there, it was very important to the Lieutenant Governor when he appointed this committee. I know Chairman Huffman would tell you if she were here. When she is here, she will tell you that we specifically were directed to come to El Paso and listen firsthand, and that's what we're here for. Mr. Mayor, you said you will not allow this tragedy to define who you are as El Paso. And I want to share with you that I come from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and Senator Hancock does also. And I hope everyone understands that we absolutely share in your grief, and we do not want this to define who we are either. And we don't want it to define who Texans are. Thank you. And I have a couple comments that I want to make. Mr. Esparza, you know, domestic violence is an issue that I've been very involved. In fact, in 1999, I passed the bill that established that suspension of the concealed handgun license of a person who was subject of a protective order, and we had a discussion at the last hearing. This is our third hearing. At the hearing in Odessa, we had a good discussion about some things that we might need to look at. There absolutely is a connection between some of our mass violence perpetrators and domestic violence. In fact, that's we know 53% of those who commit these mass violence, horrible, horrible atrocities were domestic violence perpetrators too.
That's correct.
And so, you know, we need to keep focused on that. I loved, you said something I should have been writing down. I was so enthralled with what you were saying, because this issue there is no one answer. I wish there were. I wish there was an answer to how we as legislators could prevent evil. The person who committed those horrible acts in this city was just evil. And I don't know how we prevent that, but there are other things we can do. We've had a lot of discussion about mental health, and we will have more. Your legislature invested a lot of money in mental health and is much more aware of what we need to be doing with mental health that will help us. Senator Taylor led, that Santa Fe shooting was in his district, and he led the charge last session focusing in on our schools and mental health issues. And it's going to take a lot of answers. There is no one answer. And I appreciate the work that you have done in the domestic violence arena. I'm getting to a question, Madam Chairman. I guess, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I would ask you how the coordination of resources went. Was there anything that stood out to you that could have been done better? Hindsight is always 20/20. Is there something that we can learn from just how the coordination of the resources went once?
Well, having this occur first time
Yeah.
for me, I thought that we all met at the 9/11 Fusion Center every day for hours. DPS, FBI, Department of Justice, our police, our fire, emergency management, the DA's office. All of us were constantly being informed. You know, the governor's $5.1 million grant to us that came out of some prior legislation, I think you all did, was very timely for our overtime with our first responders. I think we had $500,000 for that as a part of that bill, and then the bulk of it, I think, goes to prosecution charges, which we will exceed. And the governor said if we have any issues related to the overtime on first responders, for me to let him know. I haven't heard any feedback on that yet to determine whether we need to do that. But I thought we had, from my standpoint, I thought we had good coordination of all state and federal resources, as well as our local here.
Okay.
I went over and visited at the scene with the investigators over there. I did not go into the Walmart, but I visited and saw what they were doing and how it was being processed. The governor gave me a couple of things that I needed to know from it's kind of ironic. He's had as much experience as anybody right now with now 4 shootings, and told me some things we needed to do to expedite things for the families, and we did. So as far as I can tell from the coordination that I observed firsthand and participated in, everything was fine. I thought everybody responded very well. And I'll tell you that what stood out in this community, I went on the Sunday afterwards, I'm over in the hospital visiting with the family of the 10-week-old baby who lost his mother and his dad. And while I'm there, they'd already identified the mother, but the father had not yet been formally identified. And they get that call while I'm there. And then we leave and we go over to the blood service, United Blood Service, and there have been people waiting there for hours to give blood, 11 hours to give blood. And they weren't going to quit till they gave. And that's what this community is all about.
What was especially harsh, unfortunately, there was no way better to do this, because I do think the response was, I'm sure there were places we could improve, but it was appropriate. I was at the command center at the Sam's store very quickly, and law enforcement responded. Those first responders responded really quickly. It was unbelievable. What was hard, though, was we had a reunification center where if you had been in the Walmart or you had family in the Walmart, you could go to. I went by there around 11 o'clock on Saturday night, and unfortunately, I don't know if there was a better way, but it took us a long time to be able to formally identify those who were lost. And that was extremely, extremely harsh and brutal for those families who've lost someone. I don't know a better way. As I tell you, I was in the store. There is a process, just from law enforcement standpoint, that things that have to be done, especially since there was going to be a prosecution, and I know that slowed the process down, but it's not unforgivable, but because I actually don't know a better way, but let me just tell you that it was very, very tough on those families who lost someone, because it took us a while before we could officially notify them. And that was harsh.
I can't imagine.
That was one of the things the governor talked to me about. Was he said apparently it took much longer in the other prior shootings for the release of the victims to the morgue and ultimately for the funerals. And he said, you got to get it done quickly. And I want to compliment the El Paso Independent School District. They were also part of it. They set up this victims center where the families went. They staffed the cafeteria. They were there 24/7 along with the Red Cross and everyone else. I mean, everybody coordinated. And it was just kind of amazing the way they came out. But the shooting occurred at 11:30. 10:30 on August the 3rd, and I think we had the final victims processed on Monday afternoon, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Monday afternoon. So I was told that was, we worked hard. I told our chief that we needed to get that done and done expeditiously so that we can start closure for the families.
Madam Chairman, I have just one more question while we have Mr. Esparza here. We have given a lot of attention to mental health recently, and we're going to continue to do that. Not everybody who is involved in mass violence is mentally ill. But we know that that is an issue that we need to address a lot of our attention to. So from a prosecutor's perspective, I'm sure you encounter offenders who don't really need to be locked up, and you know that. They need help. They need mental health care. Do the prosecutors in your area, do you feel like you have the tools that you need to direct these individuals into treatment? Do you work with your local mental health authorities? Can you tell us while you're there? And, it could, I won't get into specifics with the
That's okay.
individual who committed the crime here, but while you're there, I want to ask you if you feel like you have what you need to direct those individuals into mental health treatment.
I'm glad you asked me that question. I wanted to tell you, I'll answer your question, but I wanted to tell you this nuanced, at least from my part, a nuanced view of, I don't disagree with the mayor that we should not let this event define us. And you've probably seen the hashtag El Paso Strong.
Yes.
Okay. I love that idea too. But I think what is forgotten in both of those statements is the nuance of this secondary trauma that will affect this community. And we give ourselves sort of like, it won't define us, so muscle up. And we are strong, so muscle up. That is a good solution, and I think it's one way to move towards healing. But there are lots in this community who muscling up is not the answer, where seeking treatment is the answer, talking to somebody is the answer, because if not, we'll see people drinking more. Yep. We're going to find harm in this community in other ways because of August 3rd. And I don't have a clever way of having to put that together. I like El Paso Strong, and I want us to be strong. And in our walk, we talk about that. And I don't want it to define us, but I think there is this undercurrent of emotional hurt and trauma that needs to be addressed. In this community, to answer your question, and I'll forget this, I do want to thank you for your work on family violence issues. You've been a good partner, all of you, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. We have a task force that's working on that, on our mental health issues. We have a sheriff, Sheriff Wiles, who does a lot of work in this area. EHN, they do a lot of good work in this area. We are moving in that direction. I think what is troubling to me, just from a prosecutor standpoint, I love that we focus our energies on that issue. I do think it's needed. You should know that I am a big believer of victims' rights, not just that we talk about in the community, but in the courtroom. And so when I think about this issue, and I think it's an important issue, and I like to think of myself as someone who will collaborate on this issue. I also worry that when the defendant, the perpetrator, has committed a violent crime and there are mental health issues, it is not so simple, because I'm asked this on a rather regular basis, that we should maybe release him to somewhere else. I'm concerned about releasing that person to the community. I don't know, we are in El Paso working on that balance. Where is that balance? When can you assure yourself that you can do that? Many of the perpetrators that we see, and they commit all sorts of crimes, from low-level stuff to more serious stuff. If we could just get them, and this isn't my area, and somebody else I'm sure will testify, could we just get them to take their medicine on a regular basis? That would be their medication. That would be such a boon in the right direction. Yeah. And how do you do that, right? Yeah. But this community is committed to working on that mental health issue. I can tell you they meet regularly, and they certainly appreciate your resources.
Good. Thank you.
One thing, our police department set up a crisis intervention team 2 years ago. This council started funding it. We mirrored it after Houston and what they're doing. We work with Emergence Health, and we trained 14 out of our first police academy a year ago, and we're constantly training. And we have the advocates riding with the police. We need more. We also need more beds. We need more beds for those that need to be committed for whatever period of time, and that's an issue. But on the police side, we are focused on that crisis intervention team to de-escalate issues and to be able to have trained police and support for that.
Awesome.
You wouldn't be surprised. You wouldn't be surprised if I told you that we want to address this mental health issue, I'm sure, across the state, but it's going to take a lot more resources. The mayor is exactly right. Where are the facilities so we can, that support that effort? Where are the resources that support that effort? I think the state, and you're correct, you have dedicated lots of resources to this issue. It's going to take a lot more.
Yeah, well, and I'll add this one postscript, Madam Chairman, and then I know others have questions, but we are hurting with professionals. Even if we have the resources for the beds and the treatment, Texas has a growing population, and unfortunately, we right now do not have enough mental health professionals to meet the needs that we identify right now. So, but we're working at it. We know there's the problem, and we're working hard at it. But thank you, and to the citizens of El Paso, it's our hearts are with you, and you know, I try to find a silver lining in everything, and it's real hard to find a silver lining in this, but to watch the community, you know, the lines willing to give blood, and your first responders, there are so many good people out there. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rodriguez, and thank you both for coming today. And I'm happy to be on this committee, to work with the committee to see what remedy we can come up with. But Mr. Rodriguez, do you have Esparza. Sorry, I'm already on panel 2. Mr. Esparza, do you have any opinion regarding the saturation of social media and mental illness, the effects it has on the mental health of the transition age between 1929? It would be an opinion unless you work with domestic violence a lot and the other crimes that you cover.
I'm handicapped. I'm 62 years old.
Well,
and so my social media understanding is limited. I'd have to talk to my 30-year-old to really get a complete understanding. But I will tell you this, in seriousness, that the unchecked messages that come across the internet are extremely troublesome.
Yes.
And the way a lone wolf can tap into the internet in total privacy, when we don't know, is a scary thought. Where they can communicate with each other. I mean, one of the things that happened in this case, and I'm not telling you that's something that's not public, is that we work on this case not just with Department of Public Safety, the El Paso Police Department, and other law enforcement agencies. We also work along with the help of the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. And certainly there, it's interesting to see what they can develop evidentiary-wise from some of the things that we found. Right? And what I can tell you is, I think having social media unchecked, whatever side, whether you're left, right, middle, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Wherever you are, having it unchecked is really scary to me, because it is possible for, if you don't really watch what people are doing on the internet or listening to or having conversations with, we may be getting results like we saw here.
Another question, Mr. Esparza. Do you feel like your local mental health authority is prepped adequately or broad enough or has enough resources, is probably a better way to ask, for not only the ongoing mental health that they're tasked to do, but this secondary trauma?
Well, first I would tell you I'm probably not the right one to give you the broad overall thumbs up or thumbs down. I would tell you from the criminal prosecution end, the work that they're doing to try to look at exactly who we incarcerate, why we incarcerate them, and their mental status, that I think we are headed in a really positive direction. We are working towards trying to address that issue so that we're not housing you just because you have a mental health issue. Right? So you commit a crime, we should be able to address that, but not everyone deserves to be incarcerated especially pretrial-wise, just because you have a mental health issue, right? And so I can tell you locally, I'm encouraged that on the steps that we're taking to address that issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Other questions? Senator Rodriguez?
Just to follow up on something that both the mayor and our district attorney said with regard to the Mexican nationals. As the mayor pointed out, we share a long history of two communities really bound together by commerce, by trade, by family, by culture, by language. And the fact that you had 7 or 8 people from Juarez killed at the Walmart is a testament to that relationship, because anybody who knows anything about the border knows that there's the border's economy is driven in large part by Mexican shoppers, business people. And so when the DA mentioned that the Texas Crime Victims Compensation Fund does not provide for assistance to those individuals and their families rather, because of the residency requirement. There's in the Crime Victims Compensation Fund, you have to have lived in the area for at least six months, I believe. Welcome, Senator. And so the thing to remember is that these Mexican nationals were shopping here, and some people may think, well, why should they benefit from the Texas Crime Victims Compensation Fund? Well, for one thing, they're paying taxes. I mean, they're over there shopping at the Walmart and paying the sales tax. People come over here and they pay the gasoline tax when they get gasoline, and other ways that they contribute. And some of them own a lot of property. They have businesses here. So I think it is worth for us to look at that feature of the Texas Crime Victims Compensation Fund. If we're going to have any more of these incidents occur along the border, I think I can safely predict that there's going to be people from both sides of the border becoming victims, and we ought to be, as a state, having Mexico as our largest trading partner, doing everything we can to treat those individuals, those victims, the families, fairly and equally as we do our own here on this side.
It is an unfortunate issue that we aren't able to address a system through victims compensation, those Mexican nationals. As the Senator Rodriguez is exactly right. I know, Senator Zaffarini, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. Juarez is our neighbor. That we live in this region with them. They benefit from us. We absolutely benefit from them in a lot of ways, not just economically, culturally, and others. But they are our partners, our daily partners every day, and it is unfortunate that the Crime Victims Compensation Program is not permitted to address that issue. Something to look at.
Thank you. Senator, do you want me to continue with the questions?
You can ask your questions.
Thank you. My question refers to that Crime Victims Compensation Fund. When we were in Midland, Odessa recently, we heard that that was very helpful in many ways. And we addressed the issue of what is the best way to get financial help to the victims immediately when they need it. For example, a victim who needs groceries bought, who needs a funeral paid for. What is the absolute best way? Do you think that it's through the Crime Victims Compensation Fund, or should we go through a foundation? Or that takes a long time, I understand. The Chamber of Commerce, I know, has helped in some cases. What is the best way to help the victims who need help immediately?
I don't want to diminish the importance of the Victims Compensation Program. It is extremely helpful. It'll pay for funeral expenses. It'll pay for medical expenses to a certain degree. It pays up to 60 visits for mental health issues. It will pay for lost wages and loss of support. There are a variety of things that they can do. But I can tell you that, especially in the 4 weeks after August 3rd, we were receiving calls of people who had some exceptional needs. For instance, something you probably never think about. But if you were at that Walmart and then the shooting occurred and, well, you were lucky enough to survive, but then law enforcement had you exit. And then we took complete control of the scene. And we didn't move those cars for easily a week. People had groceries in their cars. So you can imagine when they finally got their car back, what that car was like. And how do we fix that? How do we help them fix that? We had people who had vehicles who we kept them, law enforcement kept them, and they had bullet holes, so we're not releasing them. It was their only vehicle. How do you address that issue? Some people just had some very immediate needs. And I have to tell you, the Community Foundation, they were very helpful. I could pick up the phone in unique cases and talk to them about, well, can we help them, right? And I think that was a vehicle that we used a lot in those weeks immediately after August 3rd, because we had, my office, we have been in contact with all 22 families, the 26 and the 26 who were hurt but survived, and they have, just you can imagine, they have unique issues that victims' comp just isn't made for that. And I don't have a solution except that the foundation was the easiest way, and they were able to kind of skip the bureaucracy so that we could help them. One of the ways we did that was it was a woman whose car had been shot up, and it was their only vehicle. And what did the foundation do? Well, they knew a local car dealer who allowed them, who worked with them, and so they got a car. The person who had the car where the groceries were in all week, well, we were able to, with local help from the business community, they were able to help. We had to get some vehicles for people who had cars they couldn't get to them because we weren't going to release them. So that the foundation helped them get rentals for that period of time because we weren't going to give you your car back. There was a process, and it took a while before we started releasing vehicles, at least a week, maybe more. And so that was a problem. And all these other issues that occurred through these families while they were in the store because they fled. And there are some immediate needs that, well, the bureaucracy just isn't going to respond in a way quick enough to help them through their need.
We had two foundations that came together that have been doing this. We also had every funeral home in El Paso provide free funerals to every victims and their families. We had United Airlines fly every family member in from anywhere in the United States that wanted to come in for the funerals. I mean, the outpouring was phenomenal.
That's amazing. Did you deal with any fraudulent attempts to collect donations?
Not that I know of. What I thought was really, I think the mayor just said it in a really smart way here. So besides victims' compensation, the El Paso community stepped in. But we are lucky that we are a large enough community to be able to step in. In areas that are smaller, where the resources are less, I think it would be a real challenge. But we were lucky that when we held hands, we were able to help each other. Because we have a lot of resources. We're not a large city, but we're about a mid-sized city, and we have a lot of resources available to us. That helped us a great deal.
That's wonderful. Given your experience now, looking back at the Hate Crimes Act, do you have any suggested amendments to that law?
We have a Hate Crimes Act. As a prosecutor, I've never found it that helpful. It doesn't really enhance the crime to the point that it makes a difference. And generally, I would not use it because I can already punish the offender in a way that I don't need the hate crime statute. In this case, for instance, I don't need the hate crime statute. Will these issues of hate, white supremacy, will they come forward in a trial? They will. But that will be in the sentencing phase of the trial, where we have a wide open, mitigation issue, whether he has mitigating evidence or not. And so we'll deal with that issue. I don't have a good answer for you. I can tell you, though, that the one that you have, I might have, in my 27 years, I might have used it once.
Thank you. You gave us some excellent suggestions regarding the gun surrender protocol. Do you have any other suggestions for laws that we should consider?
Well, I have pitched a couple of them to you all as a group, as a legislature, where we haven't had luck, especially as my role as the chair of the Texas Council on Family Violence. But I would love to spend time with you talking about the NCIC bill. It came out of the House, it came out of the Senate, and this is not a criticism to the governor. The governor was not able to sign it because there was an amendment to it that, well, we tried to keep off, but I would love for you to look at that so that we could put the conditions of bond on the NCI so that law enforcement could deal with that issue immediately instead of having to rely on whether or not you currently have your court order in your hand or not. And that bill really, it should have passed for reasons that didn't really permit the governor to sign it. We weren't fortunate enough to have that passed. But I would easily be able to send something to your office and talk to you about that.
Thank you. And to your point about the relationship between domestic violence and mass violence, that dates back to the first act of mass violence in Texas, the sniper at the UT Tower.
Oh, that's right.
And he killed his mother and his wife before going on his rampage at the UT Tower. And to your point about healing and it taking 3 years, I was on that campus more than 50 years ago. I still visualize the sights and the sounds. And only last Saturday, we had a ceremony honoring the person who shot the sniper. And to this day, people who were there are still emotional, still are healing. And that was more than 50 years ago.
You know, you think that I can relate to that, Senator, because my wife and I love to go to Barnes & Noble on the weekend and we read and drink coffee. So 3 individuals walked in, and really for no good reason, we were apprehensive, right? My guess is they were fine.
Right.
But I didn't read for about 30 minutes until they left the store, right? It wasn't right.
It's very
I should have
sad.
felt comfortable. I've been to that, I go to that same Barnes & Noble, we drink coffee, and we enjoy that time there, but you cannot help. At least for me, after August 3rd, you cannot help but look over your shoulder.
And it'll be with you for many, many years. It's my pleasure to yield the gavel back to our chair, a distinguished chair, Senator Joan
Thank you.
Huffman.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Jaime, for being here. I've known Jaime for many, speaking of 30 years, a long, long time. So we go back to days of the Harris County DA's
right.
office. So it's great to see you in that
Likewise.
position, the wonderful job you do for El Paso. And Mayor, thank you for being here. I'm sorry I missed your testimony. I will go back and review it on the archives to make sure that I hear the points that you made. Senator Whitmire and I were delayed in Houston by that same United Airlines, but those things happen by a 4-hour delay. But thank you both very much for being here. Did anyone else have any other questions? Okay, thank you all very much for being here and the input you provided
Thank you.
today. Thank you. And we will call up our next panel. We have Jorge Rodriguez, Juan Cervera, and Michael Grady. And while they are coming up, I want to recognize some House representative members who are, I believe, are they in the audience? In the audience, we have Representative Cesar Blanco. If you want to stand so I can see you, hi. We have Representative Art Fierro is here also, and Representative Lena Ortega. Thank y'all very much for being here and participating today. Okay. Jorge Rodriguez, you may begin, sir.
Good afternoon, excuse me. My name is Jorge Rodriguez. I am an assistant fire chief with the El Paso Fire Department, and I also serve as the emergency management coordinator for the City County Office of Emergency Management. I'm here to give just a quick overview on the response, the Emergency Operations Center activities that we conducted for the 12 days that we were activated, and then some of the recovery efforts we're in right now. Beginning with the initial response, some of that you've already heard from the mayor. It was a phenomenal response where the perpetrator was apprehended within 30 minutes of the event. We had over 105 firefighters, paramedics on scene, over 140 El Paso Police Department on the scene within that time frame. Also to include, as you know, we have a very large law enforcement presence here, so we have many of our law enforcement partners from Texas Department of Public Safety, FBI, ATF. It was a phenomenal scene of trying to secure not only the initial Walmart and Sam's, but we had some phantom calls coming in for the mall, which were also being addressed during that time. The role of our Emergency Operations Center is primarily to address three main things. It's to manage information, consequences, and resources. We were activated within the first 20 minutes and fully staffed within the hour. The Emergency Operations Center is made up of multiple different agencies, from law enforcement, fire, or utility companies, streets, our representatives from the hospitals, to help manage the distribution of all the victims that were injured to the area hospitals, and then of course our great nonprofits, Red Cross, Salvation Army, United Way, that played a significant role, which in the recovery it started within the first several hours. Once the scene was secured, dealing with the consequences, the Emergency Operations Center established the Family Reunification Center, working with El Paso Independent School District and MacArthur School. And we were there for approximately 2.5 days. That's where the victims and their families were given information. And from that activity, we moved over to, and we established the Family Assistance Center, and that was held at the Convention Center downtown. The Emergency Operations Center continued to provide support to get resources and well over a dozen of different agencies to ensure that the families had access to resources at that center. Also out of the Emergency Operations Center, we worked with the local mental health authority to establish 5 different recovery sites for the community. And concurrently, for this type of event, in the 12 days, not only did we provide the support for the command post at the Walmart scene, the Reunification Center, the Family Assistance Center, but also the presidential visit, and we also had a very large vigil that occurred on 10 days after at the Wednesday. So we were active for 12 days. Part of the recovery process that we've been in almost 2 months now, we've been working with our area partners. We established a recovery and resiliency framework that helped us coordinate the Victims Fund, the mental health support for our first responders. You know, it doesn't matter how long you've been in that line of work. What was presented at that scene was something that will not be forgotten. So we want to make sure that our first responders have resources. The establishment of our resiliency center, which is going to be called the El Paso United. That's being headed by El Paso County, the Office of Emergency Management, City of El Paso, and the United Way. That'll be online in early November. We also have a work group to address the long-term needs. I mean, we're in a marathon now. That's the way that we like to think of it. And then to your comment, Senator, we want to make sure that we have that education to the public to let them know that if they are having symptoms of post-traumatic stress or anything, we want to make sure that they're informed. We have to inform them first before we can provide them the services. And the services are available now. We have a recovery center that's provided by a local mental health authority, and that's available free of charge for anyone that may have been directly or indirectly impacted by the event. Also, there's a big financial component to this event. Thank you for the support that you provided our city with immediate funding, but there's also some various grants that are being worked through to help support the El Paso United Community Assistance Center. Additionally, we have a after-action review work group that is looking at the response from all aspects. And so working with them, we hope to be able to provide a very global view of things that we did well, and of course areas that we can improve. But I think it can really be a benchmark for other communities if they have an event like this in their communities. I just have two comments that I'd like to say. One is in October of 2018, we had a complex coordinated attack exercise here in El Paso. It's a very large scale, active shooter type of exercise. And our area partners that we work very closely with, El Paso is very unique in that we like to designate ourselves as an urban island. We don't have people that commute to El Paso. Everybody that works here lives here. So between our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners, I mean, we're all neighbors. So ultimately, we all have ownership to this community. And that showed itself when we were at the Emergency Operations Center. I mean, we had FBI, DPS, and like the mayor stated, that's where we have our executive policy group, our mayor, county judge. So there was that level of collaboration you will not see anywhere else. There's no division here. But support for those type of full-scale exercises are critical, and to be able to have your communities prepared for these types of events. So any type of resources that can be provided to communities to be able to put on those are essential, because everything that we had in play for the exercise, all we had to do was put it into play that day, and it showed. And I'll close with a lot of the relationships that we've built with our local nonprofits. Really, this incident happened in the backdrop of the migrant crisis. And if it wasn't for that event that occurred, that began in early January and started to wind down towards July, it really strengthened those bonds. And so I'm very appreciative of all the partners we've had in being able what we did on August 3rd and every day thereafter. Thank you.
Sir, one of the questions I was going to ask you, I think you've more or less answered it, but it seemed to me just from what I've learned about what happened here, and I was on one of the early round tables when the governor came here, and so I actually heard you speak then.
Yes, ma'am.
And it seemed to me that, El Paso had done everything right, and you responded so quickly that it was pretty amazing, everything, the follow-up as you've gone through it today. It's really been amazing. And my question was going to be, how is there something that we as a state can help other cities or mid-sized cities and larger cities to have themselves as prepared as it appears that El Paso was in your own way? But now that, that I've never heard the term urban island before, but that makes a lot of sense. So people were able to respond very quickly. Is there anything else? And you had the training, the large-scale training, which clearly is very helpful. Is there anything else that you could suggest that we could do to help other cities, to nudge them, let's put it that way, into being more prepared just in case something like this happens?
Well, one of the most significant things is encouraging and supporting your emergency management programs. So then this differs from your public safety emergency management. It's more strategic level, and it's that one unifying entity that can help coordinate all activities. If that's a missing link, then it becomes very, very, very complicated. For smaller jurisdictions, that's usually one of the most difficult divisions or departments and agencies to fund, but it's one of the most critical. Also, these types of events differ. They really don't differ from what you would see in typical disasters, but the processes that we've seen and the structures from the local, state, and federal level, even within the local language of a disaster declaration, which we did with the city and the county the day after, there's not much language that gives us access to resources where we can scale up to the state and even to the federal level, because natural disasters are looked at very differently. And right now, there's not one avenue to help access. And those are some of the difficulties with even the victim fund.
Exactly.
They're not immediate.
We talked about, there should be a way to kind of circumvent that, and we should be able to be a little more creative. Though I think the governor's office has tried to be creative in some of the responses and so forth.
Very much
correct?
so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
But it would be nice if we had that organized ahead of time. Kind of, we want to do, kind of like we've done to prepare after Harvey, right? When we sort of had the bill that said these are the rules and regulations that the governor has the authority to waive in a disaster. It would be nice to kind of, fix it. So there'd be other kind of disasters that we would be creatively
Right.
thinking ahead. Yeah.
How do we draw a line from the local all the way to federal level to be able to access resources? And that's not to say that we didn't have the resources we needed, but there's a big learning curve where, if from the emergency management perspective, when we're looking at a disaster, there's a very straight line. But for these, you end up opening up another world that deals with it's not very clean. So that's it's something that happens, not only has happened at the local level, but the state, but and the federal.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You made a comment about making sure that we inform the public who may be having mental health issues where to go. And I think it's so important, that is important. And it's so important that as we talk about these horrific events, that we not associate all mental health problems with individuals who commit horrible crimes. Because most people with mental health problems don't commit horrible crimes like this.
Right.
And it's important that while we're educating the public, and I'm so glad you talked about that, because, you know, at some point in their lives, a large number of people experience depression or suicidal thoughts, and we're doing a better job. We've still got a long ways to go of helping those people, but we need to do a better job of making sure that we as a society don't stigmatize those people and make it hard for them to come forward. It's hard enough as it is. And so that's a part of it that I want to be sure that we emphasize, that we're going to try to provide more resources, but we also want, while we're showing people where to go, to make sure that they know that it's not something to be ashamed of. And, you know, you're not ashamed of having measles or, you know, yeah,
Yes,
not
ma'am.
going to stigmatize it. So
Definitely.
thank you for bringing
Yes,
that up.
ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Rodriguez, can you, first of all, how often, you described the community mock event that you had. Was that in 18? Is that what you said?
That was in
2018?
October 29th, 2018.
18. How often do you have citywide or mock community disaster drills that would utilize some of the same protocols to get emergency help available, staff at hospitals, things like that?
I mean, that's probably one of the most exercised scenarios in a small scale, so maybe in a hospital setting all the way up to this. So, I mean, it's been, we
You do it annually?
We do it more than annually.
More than
So,
a couple
yes,
of
ma'am.
times a year?
Several, I mean, within their own independent structures, I think most jurisdictions, from the school districts to hospitals, they're doing them at least annually, but as a comprehensive emergency management program, I think last year we did one comprehensive tabletop, and then we had that full scale that led up into the full scale.
Okay. Another question. What seemed to work well at this event, and what seemed to be the most challenging that, you know, just in retrospect and after action report, could have done better, or not done better? What was
Right.
most challenging?
One of the, on the areas of, or most challenging, was the initial support for behavioral health resources in the community. Our local health provider did an amazing job. They went into action and had 5 different sites on scene, but that was really one element that we hadn't completely.
Just limited resources?
Well, not so much limited resource, but it wasn't an area that we had exercised to the point that I would have been happy with. So ultimately, that was my responsibility to ensure that we looked at all different areas. But in the response for this was one of the biggest areas that we did well on, but the degree and scope of it for the long term is one that we really don't take into account. We did a really good job for the initial response, but the long term is where we had to bring in additional resources from the state to help support that, because you're providing support for an entire community, and that requires a lot of resources.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Zafferin?
Thank you. Sir, did you see any need to offer counseling services for the first responders who also dealt with the aftermath and the trauma?
That was one of the, also one of the, I think one of the best practices that we've taken from other jurisdictions is the importance of dealing with the first responders. On the fire department side, we actually brought in all of those that responded, all 105, and they were able to get debriefed and provided them access to resources on the first day. And we have a work group specifically to address all of the different agencies that were on scene to ensure that they have support systems within their organizations, and if there isn't, to provide any additional resources. But yeah, it's been an ongoing process.
Earlier, thank you. Earlier, you said something about any resources that the state could provide. Do you have any particular resources in mind that the state could provide?
Not at this time. The state was great. We had on the, depending on the scale of your event, the medical examiners were supported through a DMORT team that was sent in by the state, and they were here within 24 hours, which was amazing. So that's an area that they provided us support. DPS, of course, has always been a great partner here locally. But at this point, there's everything that we asked for, they provided.
Excellent. It's good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. And now we have Mr. Cervera. Yeah? Hello?
My name is Juan Acevedo.
Yes,
That's
sir.
my second name,
Okay.
last name, okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Honorable Congreso, I write this speech in English too.
Okay.
I'm going to share that with you. But I like to give some voice to the people of Mexico who suffered. That's why I'm going to express me in Spanish.
Yes.
Okay.
We have these. Whatever you would like, whatever you'd like to do.
Bueno, lo que perdimos todos el 3 de agosto en El Paso durante la matanza que planeó y ejecutó con fatales consecuencias el supremacismo blanco en el terrorismo doméstico, como han definido los investigadores, es difícil sintetizarlo todo, toda esa angustia y todo ese dolor causado en este speech. Agradezco esta oportunidad de dirigirme a ustedes con gran respeto por este país maravilloso, que ha sido ejemplo mundial de generosidad y de participar con gran sentido moral en acciones pasadas desplegadas en muchas regiones del mundo, llevando esperanza a los pueblos que sufren. Por todo esto reconozco que la gran mayoría de los americanos y ningún pueblo del mundo comparten este odio sin sentido que nos ha dejado conmocionados en esta vibrante comunidad binacional. Como juarenses, sabemos de los afectos arraigados por generaciones entre ambos pueblos que compartimos familias, trabajos, amistades, desarrollo de comunidad, comercio bilateral, cultura y diversión. Más del 80% de todos los que aquí vivimos somos latinos y muchos que vienen de más de 40 países han encontrado aquí su destino para desarrollar una vida de grandes privilegios en el sentido de una vida de seguridad y una ciudad llena de respeto por los demás. Por eso los hechos que se dieron son incomprensibles. Por eso la respuesta de la población que no ha permitido que ese discurso de odio y esa retórica de aquellos que no comprenden que el mundo cambió para ser mejor y no regresar a la violencia entre comunidades que son diferentes en su color, en su idioma, en su cultura, ya que esta, en vez de ser una amenaza, es un gran activo para la región y de comunidad para hacer más grande a Texas, a América, y todo esto beneficia a Juárez y a México. En Juárez tenemos nuestros propios problemas. Y este oasis de paz en medio del desierto nos permite construir el legítimo deseo como mexicanos de encontrar en El Paso, en muchas ocasiones, cuando las cosas y los problemas han crecido en nuestro país, el refugio, un lugar que nos acoge y nos respeta. Hoy perdimos la confianza, ya que muchos juarenses y mexicanos de origen o de descendencia se consideran objetivo de ese odio y racismo que sembró Patchwork Crucius y que puede ser replicado por aquellos que traen una descomposición en su capacidad de analizar lo correcto y menos evaluar su propia destrucción, ya que es terrible que un hombre tan joven sea capaz de generar tanto odio y resentimiento por una comunidad que no comprende ni entiende y que solo ha venido a contribuir a este país en todo tipo de actividades y que hoy son más del 15% del total de la población de los Estados Unidos. Los muertos que no debemos olvidar y los heridos que aún sufren las consecuencias de esta terrible masacre que, aunque nos trajo dolor, pudimos enfrentar gracias a esa gran capacidad de afectos que compartimos y fortalezas que tenemos como ciudades hermanas. Se atrevió a romper nuestra paz y que su acción despertó los mejores valores de nuestra sociedad. Hoy solo nos queda aliviar el dolor de los que sufren por las pérdidas de sus padres, de sus hijos, de sus hermanos y amigos y conocidos. Aliviar el dolor de aquellas familias que enfrentarán durante muchos años consecuencias de esta acción en su salud física y su salud mental. Acompañar a aquellos que estuvieron en el área de la tragedia y que sufren secuelas emocionales. Tenemos 90 de ellos mexicanos que estuvieron en ese sitio. Y al final, como comunidad, enfrentaremos todo ese discurso que nos quiere destruir, pero que al final solo sacó lo mejor de nosotros mismos. El Paso y Ciudad Juárez Strong prevalecerán por encima de los que nos quieren lastimar y por los que en su miopía no dimensionan la grandeza de nuestra vecindad, ni comprenden las raíces profundas que tenemos en nuestros pueblos hermanos. Solo quiero pedir adicionalmente que la ayuda a los que no se han recuperado por este problema siga fluyendo. Hoy he recibido la llamada de un señor que hirieron a su esposa, hirieron a su hijo, hirieron a él. Él tiene colostomía, tiene una herida todavía abierta y lo cambiaron de hospital. Tiene 3 meses ahí y creo que va a tener otros 6 meses por lo menos todavía en hospital, que cuesta mucho. Los mexicanos nunca nos preparamos para este tipo de problemas y casi nadie tiene aseguranza. Y ese problema les puede crear un profundo, una situación financiera que nunca van a poder arreglar en toda su vida. Y el apoyo del Fondo de los Mexicanos lo hemos recibido puntualmente por parte de Paso Community Foundation, que les ha entregado mes a mes, permanentemente desde el proceso, 1.500 personas a cada uno de los heridos y $1.500 por persona a cada de los heridos, a cada uno de los muertos. Así que, sin conocerlos a todos, los hemos acompañado en su dolor y los amamos, aunque ya no están muchos con nosotros, pero muchos siguen vivos y con ellos y de ellos nos tenemos que ocupar. Gracias. In question in Spanish, I try to do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair. ¿Cómo están trabajando los oficiales de las 2 ciudades para asegurar que los heridos y las familias de los que se murieron, de los que fueron matados, están recibiendo toda la asistencia que necesitan? Usted dice que están recibiendo $1.500 por mes.
Sí, actualmente a través del Paso Community Foundation, que hicieron un fondo que está manejando un grupo de expertos para juntar todos los dineros que generosamente el pueblo americano juntó, más ¿cómo se llama?, duplicación de apoyos. Hemos recibido a través de esta gente, los acompañamos a las casas de las personas.